Well, it's taken a long time to get all these panels ready. Between the flattening, the thickness planing, the edge joining, gluing them together, and then finally cutting them to their final size, it's been quite a chore. But we're now ready to start on some joinery, and we're going to start with cutting dados and rabbets. So let's get going. So the first step in getting set up to cut the dados and the rabbets for these bookshelves was to move my outfeed table out from the table saw so that I could get on all four sides. Then I took the two side pieces. These are from bookcase A, and if you'll notice, they're labeled on here. This says right A out. This means it's the outside right hand side, and there is an arrow pointing up, meaning that's the top of the cabinet up there. Similarly, this one is labeled left A out with an arrow pointing up. So I've got the inside faces of both of these panels facing up. What I'm going to do is very carefully line up the ends here and get those just right, and then I want to clamp them together so they don't move. And the idea here is that we want to cut both of our dados at exactly the same time, and that feels just there we go, perfect. Don't want to feel any seam there at all. Okay, and we don't want these to move because we want to cut all of the dados, we want to cut them in the two boards at the same time. That way we're assured of alignment. And now with them clamped together, I can move them around a little bit if necessary. Now to mark out for our dados, if you'll recall, our first shelf on the bottom is the 1 inch thick base piece. And I'd like for that to be positioned so that the top of it is at 3.5 inches. That means I'll need a line at 3.5 inches and a line at 2.5 inches, giving me my 1 inch dado. Then we'll space out our 3/4 inch dados for the top and the two shelves in between. So let's get that marked out. Okay, I've set my combination square at 2.5 inches, which will be the bottom of this first dado, and I'm just going to make a few marks along here and make sure that we connect the dots. The absolute dimension there is not as critical as the consistency of the dimension, but they're both pretty critical. I'm now going to switch this over to 3.5 inches. And I'm going to make another series of marks. And with a little luck, those will be 1 inch apart. Yeah, that's pretty lucky. Okay, so now we're going to connect these dots and draw in our lines. Okay. right, these are the guidelines for our first dado, the 1-inch thick dado. Now the next one is going to start at 17 inches above this last dado. So we're going to have a 17-inch space essentially there. Now what that's going to make that is 17 plus 3.5 is going to be 20.5. So now I'm just going to use my tape measure and I'm going to make a mark at 20.5. And I'm going to make another mark. I'm going to make a few marks here. Make sure I don't miss. This may look a little tedious, and it is. Let's put one here kind of close to the middle. By making multiple marks here, you can eliminate any potential error caused by the thickness of the pencil lead. Because the individual marks will blend together. I'm doing it on this side. I would typically do it on the other side, but I'm doing it on this side because the light's a little better. All right, and this is going to be a 3/4 inch. So now we need to go to 21 1/4. Okay, now the next shelf up is going to have an 18-inch space, so we may have to move this clamp. We've got 21 1/4. That's going to make it 39 1/4. And yes, we're going to need to move that clamp. So since we've got one clamp on it, we're good to do that. Nothing's going to move. Just going to move this down here a little bit. And let's get our 39 1/4 inch measurement. Okay, 39 1/4, 3/4, so the next one's going to be at 40 inches. And as long as we're here, we might as well go ahead and mark out for our rabbet on the top, which is going to be 3/4 inch. We'll just do that with this. It'd be a little bit more accurate. Go. All right, now I want to show you the setup for using the Festool router and the guide rail for cutting these dados. Okay, this is the Festool OF 1400 router, and this attachment is what's called the guide stop. I'm not sure why it's called a guide stop. It's a little bit of a misleading name for it. Now, you can set this up a couple of different ways. I set it up so both of these blocks are riding on these two raised channels on the guide rail. I just find it to be steadier. However, when you set it up that way, you lose the micro positioning adjustment that you would have if you set it up the other way. But that's okay, because I'm actually going to use a 3/8 inch bit and route this dado in 3 passes, and my 3/4 inch dados I'll route in 2 passes. So that'll work pretty good. Now what I've done is I've set the guide rail down. I did it with the dust collection not attached. Makes it a little bit easier to see. And what you do is, with the power turned off, turn the bit till you see the widest part, and then plunge it down till you get it right on the line. And when you get it right on that line, then move the router to the other end and get it right on the line there. And when you've got it right on the line for both ends, then I clamped this down using these scraps on either side. Now, some people say you don't need to clamp this down, but I'd much rather clamp it down and not take any chances on it moving. So the nice thing too about having these scraps here is it gives you the ability to do a little bit of a test before you start, which I've done just to make sure that the depth was set exactly the way I wanted it. It's set to cut 1/4 inch deep. So we're basically ready to route. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plunge this down and lock it, and then I'm just going to go real slow to the other side of the board. Okay, now that's only, I needed an upcut bit, left a lot of dust in there. Okay, now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move the rail over to this line, and I'm going to cut the 3/8 inch cut along here, and then I'll cut my middle cut to take out the rest of the waste. I'm going to get this out of here just so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to disconnect the power just to be safe, and I'm going to go ahead and take the dust attachment off because it makes it easier to see, and I'll loosen the clamps and move the guide rail over. Okay, that looks pretty good. So we'll reconnect. And we're ready to go again. Now all we have to do is move the guide rail into the center to take that center section out, and this wide 1-inch dado will be done. And we don't need absolute perfection on the alignment on this one because all we're doing is hogging out the material in the middle. Doesn't really look like the dust collector's getting much, but the fact of the matter is it is reducing the amount that would be flying through the air otherwise. And there we go. And of course, since the sawdust wasn't trapped in those small ridges, it did a really nice job of getting all that out. Got just a little bit here we'll clean up with the shoulder plane, but that looks really good. I think that's going to work just fine. Okay, I've got one of my cut off pieces from the 1-inch shelf. Let's take a look here. That's a nice fit. That's going to be just fine. Yep, that fits nice. Okay, so that's cut. Ready to move on to the 3/4 inch. Well, there's been a delay. Admittedly, a self-imposed delay, but a delay. And I'll explain this. I think it's really a woodworker's prerogative to change his or her mind at any point during a project. Originally, I had set up to use a 3/8 inch straight cut router bit to cut my dados. But after the first 1-inch wide dado, I was really unhappy with the way it was clearing chips. But most of all, I was really unhappy with the feathering that it was leaving on the edges of the dado. It was going to take a lot of cleanup work, more than I really wanted to do. So I decided that I would cut my 3/4 inch dados with a 3/4 inch router bit. Unfortunately, when I pulled out the router bit that I had, I thought, you know, I better check this, and I put a digital micrometer on it, and it wasn't 3/4 inch. It was off. So, in a mad rush, I ordered a new 3/4 inch router bit, and I ordered it for next day delivery. So it's here now. It's a white side bit, and I love white side bits. They're extremely well made. And I did put the mic on this, and it is exactly 3/4 inch. So I've set up for the next dado. I'm ready to cut. So let's take a look at how this works. That is beautiful. There's absolutely no feathering in there. There are chips, but they're a lot looser and less compacted. And that's a good looking dado. Fantastic. I'm very happy with that. Just want to double check the depth. Yep, we're right on. Okay, we're in good shape. Okay, let's check the fit. I've got a scrap from one of my 3/4 inch shelves. Nice. That's just perfect. Okay, we're in good shape. Now it's time to set up to cut the rabbet. Setting up to do the rabbet is only a little bit different than setting up to do the dados. I needed to turn around because the guide rail needs to sit on the workpiece for this to work out correctly. And because the rabbet is on the very edge of the workpiece, I put a scrap down here for the shoe on the base of the router to ride on, to keep it level. And the other thing that you have to do on a rabbet is you've got to line up with just one line. So you want to be really careful to get lined up perfectly with that one line. Go back and forth, take your time and get that set just right. Clamp your rail down, and then routing it is essentially the same process. And there we go. All right, that looks really good. These are done. It's time now to cut the dados in the long side pieces for the tall bookshelf. I'm getting set up now to cut the dados in the side pieces for the taller bookcase cabinet, and the procedure is exactly the same. It's just 2 more dados. I'm not going to show you that because we're running a little short on time, but be sure and come back for the next video because we're going to switch the table saw over to a dado stack, and we're going to cut a couple of rabbets in the backs inside of the sides to accept an inset back in the cabinet. Now that inset back needs to be fabricated, so what we're going to do is we're going to then mock up, assemble the bookcases so we can get absolute final dimensions of the back pieces. Then we're going to fabricate the back and cut dados in the back so that the shelves wind up nested in dados on both sides and in the back of the cabinet. That's going to give those shelves a lot of sag resistance. But we still need to do something else to keep those shelves from sagging. And I'm not going to tell you what that is yet, but I'll give you a little hint. I was working on a project on the house, and I had this leftover piece of drip edge. And this is what gave me the inspiration for what we're going to do. See if you can figure it out before the next video. Well, be sure and come back. Look forward to seeing you, and thank you so much for watching this video. Take care.